So what is black box testing? Simplest idea, how much you know about the internal progress or process of the system. So if you don't know anything about how the code works, you don't have access to the database, you don't know how many endpoints are working, but you just focus on the input versus output. So in other words, to be honest, most of the system testing is black box. Most of the unit tests are black box. If you are doing a unit test without reading the code, but you still doing smallest piece of an endpoint, or you call just a function, pretty much you are doing a black box testing to some extent. You don't have to go to this code and figure it out where this information stores. You just send this information, send this request to an endpoint, and then it stores to database without realizing what are all the internal systems, how it is processed internally. That's pretty much covers what is black box testing. But on a high level, most of the system testing can be black box. Then you might understand we were talking about different types of testing, internal, unit, integration, and stuff. What is the use of black box testing to test? Why you need to use it as a black box without knowing anything? Well, there are two reasons. One, when you are doing black box testing, you are actually simulating the user. Actual user doesn't know where your system is stored, how it is processed, nothing. He just tried to use the software, and then he find an issue, and then he say an error, and then error message. He search it in documentation. If cannot, he calls the support, or he connect to the support system. So that's pretty much covers why we are doing black box testing, is to figure out why this happens. So you just do the same thing as a user. And in other words, when you know about the internal system, you get what we call it as confirmational bias. You kind of assume this is what expected to happen, so I'm going to skip this step. For example, if you're trying a system multiple times and your login authentication is done by not by your software but by a third-party service, so you don't need to test a third-party service, so you would skip the login functionality. But there may be a problem that the third-party system for login is not integrated well with your system. That would be a problem for the consumer. And so to avoid this confirmational bias, we try to do a black box testing just to make sure, just act as a user and see what happens. The second reason is pretty much we don't want it to have this problem goes to user. Imagine you're using software applications, like you're using a LinkedIn app, LinkedIn website, or Facebook or Amazon, whatever you're using. You don't know how these things work behind the scenes, but you know what you are expecting. You create a post, you schedule it, and you expect that post to be available at the scheduled time. It doesn't matter which services they are using for cron job, or is it a API service, or is it a scheduler. You don't need to worry about all these things as a user, but as a product creator, as a responsible person within the organizational team, you don't want that issue to be found by a consumer. So you try to act as a consumer and figure out how this happens. So in short, input versus output, you don't know how it processes, but you are just focusing on your output expectations, not on how it works or how it is implemented. So that's pretty short information about what is black box testing.